welcome to today's Fireside Chat with Knightscope, which is a company whose mission is to eradicate crime across the United States. And many of you are familiar with the company already. CEO William Santana Lee has presented at CONNECTpreneur a few times. And also, we did a great Fireside Chat with Bill 2 years ago. And this is our 2-year update. A lot has changed since we last saw you, Bill. You've gone public. You have rolled out some new products. You've made an acquisition. You have landed some marquee customers, and we're going to get into all of that in a second. You have a new announcement this week with gunshot detection. We're going to get into that. And also, you're floating a $10 million bond offering. You continue to lead the market in terms of making capital and opportunities accessible to retail investors through crowdfunding. You did it for your before you went public, you did it when you went public, and now you're doing it with the debt offering. But I want to welcome you. Happy holidays. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Greetings from Silicon Valley, ground zero from the rise of the robots, and appreciate everyone taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about what we're up to at Knightscope. But good to see you.
Great, Bill. And we are recording this, so just for the benefit of people that may not know you, I want to go into some background. And also, just as a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, you can type them directly into the chat box, or you can private message Skylar, who's one of our co-hosts today and our community manager. But Bill, why don't we just spend a couple of minutes talking about what is Knightscope? Can you give us an overview of your sexy products, some of your customers, and what kind of results have you had in terms of deterring crime so far?
Sure. But we got to start with the not fun stuff since we're publicly traded.
Okay.
So I may say some forward-looking statements, and I will not be sharing any MNPI or material non-public information. But as long as I can legally answer it, most likely I will. So getting that fun disclaimer out of the way, Knightscope's on a long-term mission to see if we can make the United States of America the safest country in the world. Crime has a $2 trillion negative economic impact on the U.S. every single year. It's a hidden tax we all pay in blood, tears, and treasure. And the quick math problem, just very simply, there's about 1.5 million security guards in the U.S., about 1 million law enforcement professionals, plus or minus. So that's about 2.5 million folks. They're operating 24/7, and you can't triple shift a human. So at any given time, there's only about 600,000 humans trying to secure 332 million Americans across 50 states. And it doesn't work. And I can prove it doesn't work because if you look at the FBI crime clock, a violent crime occurs every 26 seconds and a property crime every 4 seconds. So I don't believe the founders of our country ever expected us to build a society where going to work, going to school, or going to a movie theater literally came with the risk of being shot or killed. A lot of you are based in DC, and maybe the following will resonate. So if you look at our Department of Defense, we've got an $800 billion budget. We give the troops every level of capability you might ever imagine. And at their fingertips, a soldier in a theater of war has drone capabilities, tanks, submarines, ships, jet fighters, ISR, all kinds of great stuff. And why? It's because we have one person in charge, as Secretary of Defense. There is a massive budget and innovation process. It's costly and timely, but the widgets come out the other side, and there's a ton of innovation for our soldiers. We do not do that on our own soil. So the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security have no federal jurisdiction over 19,000 law enforcement agencies and 8,000 private security firms. There's literally no one in charge. There's no real innovation process or budget, very little risk capital. And that's why coming into the year 2024, and I don't say this for a fact, you have security guards out in the parking lot with a number 2 pencil and a notepad. And then we wonder why it's not working. We need to build some new tools to give officers and guards an ability to have their eyes, ears, and voice on the ground in multiple locations. And in order to put a massive dent in the problem, we need to give them those tools, but in numbers. So what we want to do is put 1 million machines in network that all can see, feel, hear, smell, and speak, and provide a physical deterrence. And then those are actually running 24/7. So you have 1 million at the disposal of the 600,000 people that I mentioned earlier. Then we can actually make a huge dent in the problem. So what we built is a bunch of these crazy autonomous security robots that are now patrolling across the country. We've operated, well over 2.5 million hours. It's a combination of autonomy, robotics, AI, and electric vehicle technology. All four of those are kind of really hard by themselves. We thought to make it a little harder and combine it all into one thing. And it needs to run 24/7, 365 in the rain, at night, with people and cars and everything else. So this is level 5 autonomy, meaning hands off, not remote control. You've noticed that Cruise and Waymo and Zoox and all these folks have spent billions and billions of dollars. If you looked at Bloomberg's analysis earlier this year, over $100 billion is going into self-driving autonomous technology. Maybe 200 companies out working on it, and no one shipped anything, I think, other than us. And I think that explains the level of difficulty. In terms of growth, we, let's see, 2 years ago, we did about 3.4 million in top line revenue. Last year, we did about 5.6 million. This year, we're on a $13 million annual run rate. So we're in consistent double-digit growth. And we're in that kind of scaling up part of the process. But hopefully that gives you a kind of high level perspective on Knightscope. And if you want an overview of the whole enterprise, as well as the investor deck, you can go to knightscope.com/rise, RISE. And there's a quick overview there and a bunch of cool videos at the bottom, including the annual shareholder meetings and the quarterly reviews. So I'll pause there, but hopefully that gives you a bit of insight.
Yeah, no, congrats on the great revenue growth. And I do want to go there. But before we do, I'd like to just chat briefly about your product integration. Like, you've integrated telecom with robotics, with autonomous, with,
yeah.
I mean, all these different various technologies. I know we talked about this last time, but with robotics and now with AI, and AI is hot right now, as you know. And you've been using AI all along. What are your thoughts in terms of deploying AI for security, and how does that give you a competitive advantage over some of the other providers out there?
I'm glad you asked the question that way, because for almost the entire year, everyone's like, hey, when's Knightscope going to use AI? And I'm like, what? You think there's a little guy inside the robot just kind of moving around on its own? Like there's Barney Rubble, Fred Flintstone kind of approach. So these machines autonomously navigate themselves in dynamic locations, in parking structures, in indoors and outdoors. Most of our business is outdoors, which is actually the more technically difficult. So think of it, perhaps we can split it into. One is the autonomy portion. So we use LiDAR, sonar, IMUs, wheel encoders, kind of like the odometer in your car, and a bunch of crazy software for the machine to dynamically create a map and at the same time find itself in the map and then be able to navigate on its own. So it's not like a automated guided vehicle or train or something like that, where it's just going past the same path. Like if you did that at a mall pre-COVID at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday, all you're going to be doing is having this ping pong problem of oh, there's people, and I can't get past. So you got to be able to dynamically slow down, replan, and that sort of thing. Very similar to a self-driving car. We operate 1 to 3 miles an hour, and machines also autonomously recharge, which also requires a bit of AI to find the closest charging dock, and then how long to recharge. So the machines patrol for maybe 2.5 hours or so, and then we'll charge for about 20 or 30 minutes. But we ask our clients to put that in a location where a guard would normally be stationed. So it's still operating, it's just not moving at that time. So that's worked out really well. The second part is what data can you get from the environment? So the machines generate over 90 terabytes of data that no human would ever be able to process. And we put that in a digestible format called the Knightscope Security Operations Center, or KSOC. There's a browser that you can get live streaming video. So the live streaming video is really important because you're at eye level, 360 degrees. So that is the antithesis of a CCTV camera that's really good at looking at the top of your head. So if you ever look at crime footage or whatever, it's like, how the heck are you supposed to find out who that person is? But if you're working with Knightscope, If you go into full screen mode, it's a little trippy. It's as if you're inside the robot and you can kind of see all the way around. And that gives that remote guarding capability. There's an intercom button that you can have a two-way communication with a human to human in terms of distress. The machines can read several hundred license plates a minute. Some of them have facial recognition. We can run a thermal scan of the environment. We can treat your mobile device as if it's a license plate and be on the lookout for a certain signal. So let's say you fired someone last week and you're worried they're going to come back. You can upload the facial profile, the license plate, and all the MAC addresses associated with all the devices. Now these machines are on the lookout 24/7 for those detections. And then those alerts then go to in the form of an email, text, phone call. And that could, if it's a law enforcement client, it probably goes to 911 dispatch. If it's, let's say, a community manager at an apartment complex that doesn't have a 24/7 security operations center, we also provide remote monitoring as an added revenue opportunity called Knightscope Plus, so we can remotely monitor on their behalf. And then the last thing that most people don't get that aren't in physical security or law enforcement or public safety is just a very simple concept that has become tremendously more effective than we expected. It's just physically being there. Everyone's like, why is the robot so big? It's 5 foot tall. It's 400 pounds. It's, you know, the lights are going and all this other stuff. And it's very simple. If like I put in, you know, front of Sky's home or office, a marked law enforcement vehicle, like what's going to happen? Criminal behavior will change. And no different. So if you're pulling into a parking lot at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you see a 5 foot tall, 400-pound machine roaming around, there's no one remote controlling it. There's nobody around. It's making some sounds. It might greet you. It might ask you what you're doing there. The strobe light's going. It says police on the side. Like, you have no idea what it does. You're gonna go, I think I'll steal the car somewhere else or not do that evening. And that has been a huge improvement for our clients.
Yeah, no, I saw that. I've read some articles about how it is deterring crime in residential neighborhoods and in shopping malls and stuff. I do want to
remember 10 years ago, they told us it would never work. You can't do this. It's too complicated. Yeah. It's hardware and software. Public safety is not an investment thesis. All these people here in Silicon Valley told me no, no, no. And part of what I try to encourage entrepreneurs is like, listen, you need to pick something that you're really enamored with and that you're willing to go to the mat and do the illogical, irrational, sometimes stupid things to force a victory to happen. And I think now 10 years into it, people realize we're not kidding around.
Yeah, no, and I do want to remind our guests today that we are recording this and we'll distribute the link to the video so you can watch it or share it with people that you might think are interested. Growth story. Okay, let's talk about that. You guys have well, before actually there's something, let's use this opportunity right now to announce your wonderful new technology, gunshot detection. I know you guys are in casinos, you are in schools, you are in retail shopping facilities and malls. This is extremely important right now. You want to talk a little bit about that announcement before we talk about growth?
I think Wall Street liked it. So we announced
more. I'm in Baltimore. That's why we need that.
We do.
So we announced this morning that we're commenced sales of automated gunshot detection. And this is a decidedly different approach than a publicly traded company called ShotSpotter, now called something thinking, sound thinking. Their ticker is SSTI. And it's a little bit of a different approach. It's a much more hyper localized area where we can put an array of AI-driven microphone sensors, as opposed to putting them across an entire city and then trying to maybe triangulate with a human in the loop that I think maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning, there possibly maybe could have been a gunshot between 8th Street and 5th Avenue. This is intended to be very localized. And as part of the acquisition last year we did of Case Emergency Systems, we have over 7,000 machines in network of these emergency phones, call boxes, and blue light towers. And what we'd like to do is over time do a massive AI-driven public safety infrastructure overhaul to get all these devices that we have now in the field to do what I said earlier, to be able to see, feel, hear, smell, and speak. And part of the announcement today with automated gunshot detection is the hearing part. And I think over time we can grow that to listen for other stuff like, I don't know, glass breaking, somebody yelling help, car door slammed. All that kind of contextual stuff is really important to better understand what's going on in the environment. And we're really excited about that because it's applicable to our existing client base, which is both in the public and private sector, and a bunch of new growth opportunities. So this is one of the analysts on Wall Street's like, Jesus, Bill, you can continue to increase the TAM, or the total addressable market, for Knightscope overnight as you continue to add more and more capabilities. I'm like, yeah. So you've got a company, let's just pick it up real quick. So Sound Thinking today, it's got a $288 million market cap for one detection, gunshots across an entire city. Relatively speaking, this would almost be free for our clients over time, comparing a seven-figure investment that a lot of cities need to make versus doing something localized in the thousands of dollars. And I think this is part of I know this is part of our long-term strategy to really put some practical use of AI into the real world and make a huge difference. So we're pretty excited about that. We've got a few other things up our sleeve, as you might imagine. I've got maybe, and I don't say this for a fact again, probably 20, 30 years of workload in my head of all the stuff that we need to get done. And this is just part of it.
Well, congratulations. It's a great announcement and something that's really needed, sorely needed. Talk about growth. Now you will have quadrupled revenue this calendar year over 2 years ago, more than double over last year. I know you're a public company and you have to be careful with forward-looking statements, but what can investors expect to see in the coming year? How are you going to market? Are you are you looking at channel partners? Are you looking at specific vertical markets? I mean, there's broad application for everything you're doing. How are you guys looking at that?
I think I'm comfortable in saying that kind of what's in the pipeline will continue double-digit growth. We're at a inflection point where the entire nation's focused on reimagining public safety. So I think the growth will continue. We're sitting on was 5 million. We got it down to $4 million of new orders, of a pretty significant backlog of new orders where clients are waiting for stuff. So part of the growth capital is, not to be funny about it, we need to hire more people so we can build more machines so we can get them out the door. So that's been pretty good. We're targeting to get to profitability here in the next 4 quarters. And we can talk a little bit about that. But in terms of go to market, we tried a lot of things. Like, I think one thing that folks don't realize, like, no one in the history of mankind has done this before. So, you get a Wall Street analyst like, hey, you should give some guidance for next quarter. It's like, no one in the history of mankind has done this before. It's kind of complicated. So we know it's upward and to the right, but I'm not going to give you more than that. In terms of what's not worked, Tien, is having a third party involved. This is not a commodity. Sorry, let me split this up. On the autonomous security robot side, all the mobile stuff, this is not a commodity. The sales process is very complicated, and we have a solution for that, which we'll talk about here in a moment. On the acquisition side, or we call it K1B, the blue light towers, e-phones, and call boxes, that's more of a commodity. And so we have a number of resellers that help us sell that into corporate campuses, into schools, et cetera. And it's a much more straightforward sales process. So we've tried a bunch of stuff, small, medium, large intermediaries, fancy title advisors, single contractors, that kind of stuff. What's actually ended up working was a crazy idea that came to me during COVID, during the height of COVID, I should say, which was, I come from the auto industry. I'm an ex-Ford Motor Company executive. If you want to sell a product, you probably, a known commodity of vehicles, probably you're going to touch a client 7 to 22 times. And how many dealers do we have in the US? 20, 30,000. The auto industry is over 100 years old. For whatever reason, humans need to go to the dealership, open the door, and make sure it closes, right? They need to touch, see, and feel. You can't Zoom people to death, video, send them PowerPoints and that sort of stuff. They need to touch and feel. So I came up with this crazy idea of sending what I affectionately call a robot aquarium across the country. We call it the pod. If you want to check it out, it's at knightscope.com/roadshow. And that pod is full of robots and a bunch of large screens. So our sales team can be there in a telepresence format. So it's a combination of physical and virtual selling. So we try to do a Zoom call with a prospective client and try to understand, all right, what is the problem you have? Can we actually help you, and kind of qualify them? And then they're like, oh, this is really cool. We have budget. We have a need. Man, but I've got 5, 7, 8 people in the C-suite that need to sign this off if it's a casino or healthcare facility or something like that. Where can I go see one of these and try to get a couple people to come? We're like, you know what? About 45 days, we're going to be in your neck of the woods. Why don't we drop the pod at your doorstep? And you can bring all your executives, and if you want the media, the mayor and the city council members and the chief and the sheriff, literally there to come see the machines. And they're like, what? Yeah, we're going to bring the pod to your doorstep. And it brings the kid out of everyone. We brought it to the Ronald Reagan building in DC a couple of years back. It's hilarious because we'd spent all this time with all these pretty serious federal government officials who are all buttoned up and, tie and the whole thing. They get into the pod, 5 minutes into it, it's like, hey, robot selfie, call the family, call the kids, and it just gets everyone really excited, but also gives them a chance to literally touch, feel, ask questions. And that has been a tremendous sales tool. So much so that we've done over 100 stops across the country in probably nearing 30 states. And we're going to keep it going because it's been that effective. And again, no one in the history of mankind has done this before. So you kind of need to try stuff out and see what works, bump your head, and then move on.
Yeah, no, I mean, congratulations. You guys have done a great job in terms of getting great traction. And I did see
my team didn't want to do it. Everybody on my team was like, Bill, you're out of your freaking mind. Like, you want to do what? I'm like, yeah, it's going to work. Don't worry about it. And I thought it would work. I didn't think it'll work this well. But sometimes you just got to take that calculated risk.
Yeah, no. And I saw you guys rolled out, you're part of the New York Police Department now in the subway system. And I saw the videos of that. And, who would have thought that you guys can actually patrol subway stations? That's.
I mean, I'll tell you. So one of the reasons I started the company, I was born in New York. Someone hit my town on 9/11. I'm still profoundly pissed off about it. So I promised myself that I dedicate the rest of my life to better securing our country. And so that's why I'm willing to do the kind of irrational, illogical things to force the victory. And, try not to get emotional about it, but 10 years into the effort, to have the mayor of the largest city in the country, I'll actually tell you the story. So it was, I think, a Tuesday or Wednesday in February, and my head of sales calls me. He's like, Bill, you need to get on a Zoom call in 7 minutes. And I'm like, Jason, I'm busy. I got other stuff to do. He's like, no, you need to get on this call. It's a mayor. Okay, fine. Do the call and, I can follow up later. He's like, no, you don't understand. It's New York. What? And I thought I was getting punked. Like, seriously, I'm like, okay, here's a link, click the Zoom thing. I get on there, there's a couple of my staff. a bunch of folks from NYPD, and then there's Mayor Eric Adams logging in, and I'm like, oh, all right. And he was very gracious. He says, we've been following Knightscope for a long time. All this information I'm sharing is public. At the time, if I recall correctly, NYPD had about 33,000 officers. They're losing 3,000 to 4,000 a year.
Wow.
A year. And he's like, we've got a problem, and we need to reimagine how we think about public safety. And then he says, I know, Bill, that you're trying to make the US the safest country in the world, but I would love to work with you to see if we can make New York City the safest city in the country. And I'm still like, I'm getting punked. This is not real. And he's, what advice would you have? And I said, well, okay, we've operated across the country 6, 7, 8 winters and summers. We've done this a lot. And what gave me a lot of encouragement is he took our first bit of important advice, which was, you're going to have a outrage if you don't properly introduce yourself and have a little bit of etiquette. And what I mean by that is, we had a client some time ago who managed 350 home family subdivision. And he's like, yeah, so let's sign the contract and we're going to just have this machine patrol and not tell any of the residents. We're just going to do it. Like, yeah, we don't think that's a good idea. Yeah, we're going to do it. And as you might imagine, Hollywood has done us a service and disservice over the last 30 years. Everything that you could imagine that's horrifying happened. People like, you're spying on my wife, you're checking on what we're doing, and this, that, and the other thing. And it was a complete outrage. And so what we ended up doing was asking the mayor if we can bring the pod to Times Square. And he graciously accepted. And so he invited us to bring the pod for 3 days and put it in Times Square for the media, for the officers, for the city officials, for the naysayers, for the public to be able to come, touch, see, feel, etc. And the thing that probably got me the most choked up, they arranged for the NYPD to give a police escort of the pod into town.
Mhm.
And I was just like, this is completely insane. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And then, it's like 12 hours before the pod's going to be ready to go. And they're like, hey, you guys, you need to get a podium in place. For what? The mayor's going to be there in 12 hours. You need to set up the podium. I'm like, thanks for letting us know. And the NYPD had a massive press conference introducing the whole concept. We got a contract to put a machine in, funny enough, in the Times Square subway station. And the mayor actually used to be a transit cop. So the story gets richer. And he was like, hey, we need to get this machine next month. I'm like, well, Mr. Mayor, you don't have a contract. We've at the time, $5 million of orders ahead of you. You can't skip the line. It's not going to happen. He's like, look, please, can we get some help? And then I made another calculated risk. So we're designing and engineering the 5th generation of the K5. So we hadn't deployed it anywhere. No clients have used it. Brand new product. And I said, okay, one way we can skip the line, if you're willing to accept, kind of the first prototype, the engineering prototype, and we'll ship it and do it. And, probably not a great idea. You're going to put a brand new product on the world stage that you haven't, thoroughly deployed anywhere else. But we did it. And knock on wood, it's the best performing machine we have across the fleet nationwide. And we've been patrolling there for a couple of months, and we're hopeful that, we'll get the contract to grow a little bit and try to help the city.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I love looking at all the pictures in the video. Before we open up for Q&A, which we'll do in a few minutes, can we talk about the bond offering real quick? Why are you doing a bond offering? Sort of, what are the terms? What's the use of funds? And why are you continuing to utilize crowdfunding? I mean, you did it for when you were a private company, you did it during your IPO, you opened up the opportunity to retail investors, and now with the bonds, you're doing the same thing. What's your sort of philosophy around that?
I said it to you
Humble.
earlier.
Yeah.
I'm allergic to toxic capital. You know, entrepreneurs should just have enough fuel to go grow the companies. And so for the benefit of the audience, so prior to us going public, we had raised over $120 million from 35,000 investors. And so if I closed 35,000 investors, you can imagine how many people might have said no. And this was our way to do a couple of things. One is to get enough capital to grow the company and build all this technology ourselves from scratch. And we physically build all the machines here in Silicon Valley, so made in the USA. Second, strategically, I started off with our long-term mission is to make the US the safest country in the world. And, you know, most people either roll their eyes or like, this guy's nuts. Okay, but if you're serious about it, you think you're going to convince the entire nation to change the way we operate society with 4 institutional investors in some ivory tower, and that's going to magically force everything to change? Not going to happen. And I get criticized on Wall Street for doing what we did. And it's like, okay, great. You want to criticize my investors? Do you know who they are? Huh? Former NYPD detectives, DHS, FBI, CIA, mayors, judges, students, teachers, like a literal cross-section of America. And part of this is building a movement and supporters. So we had 35,000. I think to get this done, we're going to need 1 million supporters to really force the change. So part of it was strategic. Then when we got into the public markets, and I'm going to try to be as polite as possible here, the underbelly of Wall Street is highly toxic, sometimes bordering on illegal behavior, especially for micro cap, nano cap companies, anything like less than $1 billion a market cap or 500 million. There's all kinds of nasty shenanigans happen. And I rather pay our supporters a return on investment than the Wall Street elite or the like. And there's a lot of people on Wall Street don't want this bond offering to succeed because normally there's maybe 200, 300, 400 debt investors that I'll use this word on purpose, prey on small cap companies, and these CEOs are just trying to do the best by their shareholders and grow their company, but you end up taking a massive amount of toxic capital with all kinds of weird conversions and some affiliate over here shorting the stock before you sign the term sheet, and then all kinds of shenanigans happen along the way. And if we're successful with this bond offering, it's going to disintermediate a bunch of bankers and hedge funds who are not going to be happy with retail investors now having access to high yield debt from publicly listed companies. So normally if a publicly listed company wanted to raise $10 million, they call some mid-tier iBank who comes up with, 3 nasty term sheets and then stuffs it down the CEO's throat. And not in the interest of the existing shareholders, but obviously in the interest of the hedge fund. Reg A tier 2 offerings is what we used prior, and just because we're publicly traded doesn't mean we can't use that same general solicitation of retail investors. So we, instead of doing a piece of equity, which is a little convoluted, if you're publicly traded and you're going to go sell a piece of equity, like how are you going to tell an investor, like, you're selling oranges, this one's liquid and trading, and then you're going to set a price on this thing over here? It's like kind of a hard sell. So what we wanted to do is set up some growth capital. So the use of proceeds is to literally grow the company, to hire more people and put more machines out in the field and hire more engineers, et cetera. But have that return on investment go to the bondholders, and we'll get to the terms in a moment. And the idea is that we could then have the general public be able to participate in high yield debt offerings. So you usually wouldn't get the phone call from some banker on Wall Street saying, hey, this publicly traded company wants to sell you some debt. It's not readily available. So we engineered this bond offering to be able to allow us to do a call like this and generally solicit folks that are interested. And you can go to bond.knightscope.com, and very simply, we're raising $10 million, up to $10 million. It's a 5-year bond, and it's 10% interest. So I'll just use an example to make it super easy. If you invested $10,000, just for grins, we'll pay you $1,000 in cash annually, right? For 5 years or up to 5 years. And then at the end of the 5-year or at maturity, we'll give you your original 10,000 back. So you started with 10 grand, you end with 15 grand. And what did we do with that money? It's literally to go, it sounds a little crazy, but literally to use your investment portfolio to go fight crime. And that's kind of the offering. We've done our first closing. So we've got all the plumbing to work. It's a little complicated on the back end. But it's non-dilutive for our existing shareholders. It gives us a growth capital, and then the return on investment opportunity goes to our supporters and not some bunch of Wall Street insiders.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for that, Bill. We'll open it up for Q&A. We've got a ton of questions, and also anyone who wants to ask a question, you can either put your question into the meeting chat or raise your hand. I'll turn things over to Skylar Rallison, who's our community manager. Sky will moderate Q&A. Sky.
Yeah, thanks, Tian. And of course, thank you, Bill. I mean, it goes without saying what an impressive company that you've built. And it looks like other people can see that in the chat. But our first question, pretty easy one to answer, is the company cash flow positive?
Not yet. We've announced that we're going to hit profitability targeting fourth quarter of next year. And the way we're going to do that is we need to obviously continue to increase revenue and the quality of revenue. We've got a massive list of cost reductions on the bill of material of the machine itself, on the assembly hours. Like the old machine used to take us 120 hours to build. We're targeting the new machine to get down to 20 hours to build. There's some purchasing efficiencies we need to do, some retooling and re-architecting of some systems. There's a bunch of maintenance and service costs that we're wanting to get down, and then trying to encourage as much as we can a number of our clients to switch to private LTE. So remember, I mentioned 90 terabytes of data. Not all of it goes, but it's pretty heavy. You don't want to see our telecom bill. So most of these 95% of our machines are on commercial LTE. And you can imagine the amount of data transfer. It gets really expensive. The private LTE solution basically brings that down, not zero, but nearly to zero. So getting our telecom costs down is also important. So we've got a path to get to profitability while still growing the company. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then lastly, you got to remember, we need in this to have some scale in order to get to profitability. Like, so there's some weird accounting that goes on sometimes because it's a machine as a service. We don't sell them hardware or software, data transfer, anything outright. So we recognize revenue ratably over that, kind of monthly period. So as a crude example, we have a staff that monitors all the machines 24/7, as if we're AT&T or Verizon, making sure all the machines are operating, right? Just because we added 20 new clients doesn't mean we need to add, 20 more of these folks, right? There's some scale as we grow. And so we're feeling pretty good about things, actually. And so hopefully in the next 4 quarters, we can put up some good news.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill. The next question we have are, what channels are being used to gain market share?
Primarily, as I mentioned earlier, but primarily direct. The sales complicated, the technology is complicated. It takes us 6, 9, 12 months to onboard a new salesperson. So having a third party try to sell something that complex is likely not a good idea. On the flip side, on the stationary side, as I mentioned, to reemphasize, we do use resellers on that side.
Okay, great. And I know Deborah Tillett, it looked like you had a question. So if you want to unmute and ask yourself, that's a great time to do so.
Yeah, I just wondered, Bill, William,
Bill.
are you familiar with Trevor Brooks, who founded a thing that was called Gun Bail?
Doesn't ring a bell.
I worked with him in 2016, and he's still quite a good friend, but he was a former incarcerated for a murder that he did as a teen. And he realized that initially people in that position lots of times couldn't afford bail. And so he developed a lockbox where you could put a secure gun. It would go back to the police, get out of the public, and that would be your bail. He has since morphed, and I forget what the name of the new company is, but he's actually doing not with robots, but a lot of what you're doing, which is within like 200 or more, I mean, almost a quarter mile of a school exit. There are ways to detect firearms and things like that. So I'm happy offline, leave it to other people to connect with you, because he's still really going after this problem.
Yeah, a couple comments there. Thank you, Deborah. One is, if you don't get your question answered, you can reach me directly at invest@knightscope.com. That literally comes to me and me only, and I do reply to everyone. You may not like my answer, but I do reply. And second, I think, not necessarily tied to exactly what Deborah said, but the other growth strategy for us, which we've already proven to be fruitful, is growth through acquisition. So in a prior life, I've now bought, I've lost track now, probably 24 companies. So reasonably fluent and in mergers and acquisitions. And there's probably a list of 50 companies I'd be interested in looking at. And so as the market cap grows and financing opportunities are available to us, or there's some seller financing, we're continuing to look at acquisitions that can help us with the long-term mission, right? Top line revenue growth, introducing technologies, anything to get these machines to see, feel, hear, smell, and speak, et cetera. So I think it's we've got a very bright future ahead of us.
Wonderful, Bill. Thank you. Are you communicating with the federal government, law enforcement, military, DHS? I don't know if it's DARPA or DARPA. all the above, if you were to answer that.
Yeah, so we've spent a couple, this January will be 3 years working through a nightmare cybersecurity review process. We hold a contract with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, which is a great segue for us. We're in a lot of healthcare facilities. The chief security officer at the VA manages 143 police departments, and we actually performed on the contract, built the machine, shipped it, deployed it, and then the cyber team showed up from the feds and like, hey guys, you at the VA and you at Knightscope can't be doing this. You didn't pass the FedRAMP cybersecurity review process. And we're thinking it's going to be like a 6, 9, 12-month process, and then, check or whatever. We're like 7 figures into it, and we're in our 3rd year, and we're on pins and needles, just waiting, hopefully, for the ATO or authority to operate. And we're hopeful that once we get that all the other conversations that we've had reopen. So think about FEMA. How many warehouses do you have? Customs and Border Protection. We spent a lot of time with the TSA or the GSA. They literally manage, they're the landlord for the federal government, as most of you know. They've got 10,000 buildings that are protected by the FPS, or Federal Protective Services, with 15,000 officers and guards. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, but they're using technology that's beneath the dignity of this nation, and need a massive overhaul. Like, hey, who secures NASA? How about the Social Security Administration? Man, USPS looks really like UPS and FedEx. Aren't you in a bunch of logistics companies? Like, somebody totaled this up, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but something like 44,000 physical security contracts issued annually, worth like $14 or $16 billion. So that's why not very popular with internally. to continue to go work on this cyber approval. But I'm glad we did it, because if you look at the cyber requirements from, I can't name the companies, but large retailers, healthcare facilities, or someone like the NYPD, and cyber requirements are getting closer and closer to what the federal government's asking for. So we're, again, on pins and needles, because it's driving us crazy, just sitting and waiting. But I will say there's dozens of people on the federal side working on it, as well as my team. So hopefully we'll get some good news soon, but we don't control that. So let's see.
Makes sense. Thanks, Bill. Are the new capabilities that you had described, such as like the gunshot detection, are those added to the robots, or are they added to the station that receives audio and video from the robots?
Kind of mixed bag. So the one that we announced this morning, it's literally a separate device that gets put on a wall, on a stationary robot, on a ceiling, on a telephone pole, indoors and outdoors, every couple 100 feet. And the long-term idea is those detections would then be integrated. So the slick thing to do would be, I heard a gunshot, here's the here's the XYZ location, robot should go there. Then there's other things that we're working on, like thinking through how we go implement visible weapon detection, that someone's brandishing a weapon but didn't fire it, would be as more of a comprehensive solution. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and depends on how we want to go implement it.
Okay, perfect. Can you explain the volatility, in particular, the dramatic drop in the stock price?
All right. So I'll do the short answer, but if you want the long answer, go to knightscope.com/rise and go to episode 9 of the Rise of the Robots. This is the annual shareholder meeting where I spent an inordinate amount of time on downward pressure of stock and upward support. First, we don't control the stock price. I get plenty of nasty emails and texts like, why are you, Bill, not fixing the stock price? Two things I can do. I can improve the financial performance of the company, and I can communicate until I'm blue in the face and tell everyone I can about Knightscope. But other than that, it's supply and demand. I would point out that a year ago, we had less than, maybe on the order of about 700,000 shares shorted against us. As of yesterday or Monday, there's 6.9 million shares shorted against Knightscope. That downward pressure is certainly not helpful, because there's folks trying to profit off of trying to force us to fail. And to me, you got to pick. If Knightscope wins, everyone wins. If Knightscope fails, or the criminals and terrorists win, no one wins. And this, on a personal note, nothing to do with the company, I think shorting should be illegal. Like if you go to a pizza parlor and you don't like the pizza, you should just walk out and never buy that pizza ever again, right? But you really shouldn't have the right to like pour gasoline all over the place, write a hit piece on it, light the match, burn the place down, tell everyone about it, and then demand a discount. Like, that's not appropriate, especially if it's a public safety or defense company. Like, you're literally siding with the criminals and terrorists. So that's certainly one aspect. I think the short stuff is a problem. Second is the company still needs capital, and I'm sure there's some algorithm out there somewhere that says, if small cap company still not profitable, needs cash, short. On the flip side, we trade like crazy. Some days we trade 100,000 shares, some days we trade 5 million shares. If you go back in history, we trade 30 million or 60 million shares. There's eyes on the company. But all I can do is continue to improve the performance of the company. At some point, it'll correct itself. There is no possibility that a company at the intersection of AI, robotics, autonomy, and electric vehicle technology, working on the nation's most important problem with double-digit growth, ends up being profitable, is going to get ignored. It's just not going to happen. I own 7 million shares. I haven't sold a single share, including in the public listing. My entire net worth is in this. So I'm betting on the long-term future of Knightscope, and I'm pretty comfortable where we are long-term. Short-term, this is going to be brutally painful. I can't give you financial advice, but people that are investors, DCA is something of importance for some that you can look up on dollar cost averaging. This is a little infuriating, but the market cap's kind of where we did our Series B. And I can assure you we're nowhere near that level of valuation. So I think for some it's an opportunity, but people need to weigh for themselves and do your homework.
Thanks, Bill. Someone would like to know how many employees that you currently have.
Let's see, we've got almost 100 employees and 3 production facilities.
Okay. And where are those production facilities?
Yeah, and we're running out of room. So the headquarters is in Mountain View, California. We have another production facility in Downey, California, and Irvine, California, both of them in Southern California.
Great. Okay. Where do these bonds sit on the balance sheet? Are they senior or securitized in any manner?
Great question. So we don't have any senior debt. So this is technically subordinated debt, but it's the most senior in the cap table above the preferred stock and the common stock. There is a good chunk of preferred stock because the manner in which we did our public listing, we did not do an S1 underwritten IPO, so we didn't have an automatic conversion for all the preferreds to go to common. So there's still a bunch of preferred stock, but it sits senior to basically everybody.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with the gun bail Trevor Brooks? That was the question.
Sorry, you broke up, Sky.
Question,
Oh,
Sky.
sorry about that.
No
What was
problem.
that? Okay.
I missed the
Can you guys
question,
hear me
Sky. You
okay?
broke up a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll ask the next one because it looks like that person had hopped off anyway. Someone would like to know, are the robots sold or leased to the end user?
So as I mentioned before, it is a machine as a service business model. So if you want to look at the unit economics, just go to knightscope.com/rise, download the investor deck. There is a slide there. But just to recap that slide real quick, crudely today, there's some cost reductions coming. It costs us $50,000 to $60,000 to build a machine. We generate revenue of that first calendar year roughly to cover the cost of building that machine. So think about, you get a contract, you use the revenue to basically pay for that machine, and we can get that financed so we can improve the cash flow. But the second, third, fourth, fifth year, you're not having to build another machine, right? So that machine is quote unquote free. And now you need to focus on the operating costs. How much maintenance and service, what's the telecom cost, cloud costs, et cetera. So what we want to target over the long term, it's going to take a little while, is about 63-65% gross margins. So what we want this to look like is luxury automotive per unit economics, meaning you're buying a new Tesla every year. But the margins over time, over that 5-year period, look more like a software as a service company.
Okay. What was your thinking around going public and getting into really toxic capital, and why not finance growth through another approach where you're not so bound by the Wall Street short-term or near-term views?
A tricky answer, but I'll try here. So we had done multiple Reg A pluses. I did not believe that we could do another one to raise the growth capital that we needed. Second, we have all the costs of being public without any quote unquote of the benefits. The issue that caused the toxic piece of debt that we took on last year was the acquisition of case emergency system. So right at the end of the due diligence side of things, the target had disclosed that they had taken a bunch of SBA loans from the US government. And we're like, oh, cool, 30-year paper. Like, we're happy to assume that. And then the federal government told us, because we're publicly traded, you can't assume those SBA loans. So at the height of the volatility in the market, must have been in the summertime of last year, we had to go find $6 million out of thin air to go pay down that SBA loan before we could acquire the company. So we took on a piece of not great capital to finance the acquisition, and we paid that piece of nasty capital down June of this year, and that caused a lot of grief, and never going to repeat that again. And so that's why this bond offering is up and live. I think I'll pause there.
Okay, thanks. And I know that we are about at the end of the scheduled meeting. So if anyone needs to hop off, of course, feel free to do so, and this will be recorded. Bill, if you're okay to stay on for a few minutes, we can continue going through the last of the questions.
I don't want to attend the next meeting, so yeah, I would like to hang out with you guys.
Perfect. Well, you know what? We'll just quickly go through a couple. We only
All
have
right,
a few more
I'll do
left.
Twitter answers. How about that? Like, let's do it fast.
Yes, let's do that. Is the robot designed to support new revenue generated apps and services?
At a macro level, yes.
Okay, perfect. Does your current program welcome external technology partners to help with service integration into other security infrastructures? That is police and military.
Selectively, yes. So for example, Knightscope Plus, we might have a partner do remote monitoring. There's some technologies that it's going to cost us more time and money to build than for us to do a white label partnership or something like that. So absolutely. The mission here is to secure the US, not to build everything in-house.
Okay. Why do you think that the bond offering is better for investors as opposed to buying the company stock at the current near historical low price?
I can't provide financial or legal advice, obviously, so everyone needs to make their own decisions in terms of their investment portfolio and risk. So for some, if they're at a life stage where the income of passive income is more attractive without the risk, then likely the bond is more attractive. If you're looking for uncapped upside potential returns, then the stock would be appropriate. Some have mixed. We have both investors wanting to do. Another investor asked us this crazy question. It's like, is it legal for me to invest in the bond, and then when you give me the cash for the interest, can I use that to buy shares? Like, I can't tell you what you do with your money, but it depends on your investor profile. Either way, you would be helping support the company.
Okay. And last question that we have for today is, what is the current burn rate? How far will 10 million take the company if it takes about 1 year to reach break-even cash flow?
So crudely speaking, if you look at our last 10Q filing, we're plus or minus short. So we have three sources of cash. So we have the $4 million worth of orders. So obviously, as we ship, we get cash. We have an at-the-market facility that we use sparingly when needed. That's managed by our bankers at H.C. Wainwright. And then we have the bond offering. We're loosely short, and it varies because we might buy a bunch of stuff. So it's choppy. So just for planning purposes, crudely speaking, it's about $1 million a month. But hopefully we're going to get that down significantly over time as we march towards profitability.
Okay. Amazing. I know we had a lot of comments. There's a lot of people who wanted to connect with you, Bill, so I'll get you those people later. A lot of thanks in the chat. So it's a big thank you to Bill. This was a great fireside chat. Obviously, Knightscope is a very successful, impressive company. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to talking with you more. So we'll have those follow-up conversations in the future. But everyone can be on the lookout for the recording for this meeting. And I'll also include Bill's email address in that email to you, so you can reach out to him if you have any further questions. So thank you everyone for joining today, and we hope to see you again soon at one of our upcoming events.
And don't forget, long Knightscope and short the criminals. We'll see you on the other side. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Thanks, Bill.